I was heading home to pack a bag for the road, but when I arrived, I noticed Terry's car parked in the driveway. Strange. She was supposed to be at work, and I knew her schedule better than my own. She always left by 8:30, no exceptions. Meetings, reports, deadlines, I had heard it all. But now her car was here, parked slightly crooked, like she had pulled in too fast. Something flickered in my chest. A quick, tight feeling I couldn't name. I killed the engine and sat there, staring at the house. There was no movement behind the curtains. No sounds. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was waiting. I stepped out and walked up the driveway, my footsteps oddly loud in the quiet. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and pavement heating under the sun. Normal things. Everything looked normal. But I had learned a long time ago that normal is where the worst things hide. The front door was unlocked. That was my second warning. Terry was obsessive about locking doors. If I ever forgot, she would lecture me for hours about home security and crime rates. But today, it swung open with a soft creak the moment I pushed it. The house smelled like perfume. Expensive, floral, cloying. Too strong. Like someone had sprayed it recently trying to cover something up. The first thing I noticed was the purse. Terry's bag, the one she never went anywhere without, was on the kitchen counter. Her phone was half sticking out of it, screen dark. If she was homesick, she'd be on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling mindlessly. If she had taken the day off, she'd be out running errands. So why was everything inside still? Then I heard it. A muffled noise from upstairs. Low. Indistinct. I froze. There were only two options. Either something was seriously wrong, or I was about to find something I really didn't want to see. I moved without thinking. My body had already decided what my mind wasn't ready for. I took the stairs two at a time, barely feeling my feet touch the floor. The closer I got to the bedroom, the clearer the sounds became. Voices. No, one voice. Her voice. It was soft, breathy, playful in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. A long time. Something inside me snapped. I didn't stop to think. Didn't stop to prepare myself for whatever was behind that door. I grabbed the handle, twisted, and shoved the door open so hard it banged against the wall. And there she was, Terry, half covered by sheets, hair messy, a look of shock frozen on her face. And next to her, some guy I had never seen before. No, not just some guy. A cop. His uniform pants were on the floor. His belt, his badge, his gun, all neatly placed on my nightstand. Like this was his house, his bed. Like I was the one intruding. Terry made a gasping noise, scrambling to pull the covers up. But I didn't care about her fake modesty. The damage was done. The moment was burned into my brain, seared into my skull. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears, my breath coming too fast, my hands curling into fists at my sides. And then she had the audacity, the absolute nerve, to say the first words of this nightmare. Baby, wait. This isn't what it looks like. I stared at her. I actually stared at her for a full second, trying to process the sheer stupidity of what she had just said. This isn't what it looks like? Really? Because from where I was standing, it looked exactly like my wife was tangled up in bed with a half-naked cop while I stood in the doorway like a goddamn idiot. The guy was already moving, scrambling to grab his pants off the floor. His gun was still on my nightstand, and for one insane second, I imagined picking it up. Not to use it, just to see how fast this bastard could really move when he wasn't busy screwing another man's wife. Terry was still talking because of course she was. She always had to talk, always had to explain, to justify, to twist things around until they barely resembled the truth anymore. Listen, you're overreacting, she said quickly, her voice high and sweet like I was some unstable lunatic she needed to calm down. Like I was the problem here. This was just a misunderstanding, okay? I wasn't expecting you home so soon, and, oh, I bet you weren't. I cut in. My voice sounded different to my own ears. Flat, unfamiliar. Go on. I'd love to hear how you explain this. I waved a hand at the bed, at the cop still fumbling with his belt. Terry hesitated. I saw it, the calculation, the way her eyes flickered, running through 100 different excuses, searching for the one that would stick. Then she sighed, like this whole thing was exhausting for her. Okay, she said, shifting to sit up straighter. Yes, I made a mistake. I'm not gonna lie to you, but you have to understand. Things between us have been off lately. I actually laughed. A short, humorless sound. So that's your excuse? Things were off? I repeated. And your solution was to screw a cop in our bed? She had the nerve to look annoyed. Oh, don't be dramatic, Jake. It's not like this is some big love affair. It was just... She gestured vaguely. It was nothing. Nothing. I felt something tighten in my chest. Something ugly and sharp and dangerous. Nothing. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. I wanted to grab the sheets she was so desperately trying to cover herself with and rip them away. Make her face this moment for what it really was. Instead, I turned my attention to the cop. He was dressed now, standing there awkwardly, like a teenager caught sneaking out of a girl's window. Except he wasn't a teenager, he was a grown man, a goddamn police officer, and he had zero excuse for being this stupid. I stepped toward him, and to his credit, he didn't flinch. He should have. What's your name? I asked, voice still eerily calm. He hesitated. Mike, he finally said. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Well, Mike? I said, still staring straight into his eyes. I'd say it's nice to meet you, but considering you were just inside my wife, I think we can skip the pleasantries. His jaw tensed. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Smart choice. Terry groaned. Jake, come on. Do we really have to do this? You're just making it worse. I whipped around so fast she actually blinked. I'm making it worse? I repeated, stepping toward the bed. She leaned back slightly, like she wasn't sure if I was about to lose my mind. I wasn't. Not yet. You know what's worse, Terry? Worse is lying to my face. Worse is making me feel like some paranoid asshole every time I asked if something was wrong. Worse is sneaking around behind my back like I'm some gullible idiot who wouldn't find out. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Jake. Do you hear yourself right now? You sound insane. I barked out another laugh. Yeah? Insane? You know what's insane? You. Thinking I'd just swallow whatever *T excuse you come up with. She groaned again, rubbing her temples. I should have known you'd react like this. You always have to blow things out of proportion. Mike shifted awkwardly, like he was debating whether or not to leave. He should. You know what? I said suddenly, stepping back. You're right. Terry blinked, caught off guard. Wait, what? You're right. I repeated, nodding. No point blowing this out of proportion. I'll make it simple. Then I turned to Mike. Get the hell out of my house. He didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his belt, his badge, and his dignity, what was left of it, and practically ran down the stairs. I followed, watching as he yanked open the front door and disappeared so fast it was almost funny. Almost. I stood there for a second, staring at the empty doorway, trying to breathe, trying to calm down. Then, behind me, I heard Terry scoff. Oh, grow up, Jake. And that was the moment I realized she wasn't even sorry that I turned around slowly. I wanted to see her when I said this. I wanted to watch her face. What did you just say? Terry sat up straighter on the bed, adjusting the sheets around herself like she was some innocent victim in all this. She even sighed, like this entire conversation was exhausting her. I said, grow up, Jake. She rolled her eyes, pushing her hair back, completely unfazed by the fact that 5 minutes ago, she was screwing another man in our bed. It's not like this is the first time something like this has happened in a marriage, she continued, her voice patronizing, like she was explaining basic math to a child. People make mistakes. We deal with it, we move on. That's what adults do. I actually felt my brain short-circuit for a second. She was serious. She was sitting there, caught red-handed, and she still had the audacity to talk to me like I was the one being unreasonable. I exhaled slowly, pressing my tongue against my teeth, trying to keep my voice steady. Let me get this straight, I said, tilting my head. You cheated on me. In our house. In our bed. And now you're telling me to grow up? Terry shrugged. Oh, come on, Jake. Don't be so dramatic, she said, standing up from the bed like we were just having a normal discussion. You act like I murdered someone. I took a step closer. She noticed, because she hesitated for half a second before plastering that fake, exasperated look back on her face. Did you even plan to tell me? I asked quietly. Terry sighed, crossing her arms. Honestly? No, because I knew you'd react like this. Like the world is ending. The world is ending, I snapped. My world. Our world. She scoffed. Jesus, Jake. Stop being so dramatic. You always do this, you always turn everything into some big emotional mess. And for what? She threw up her hands. It's not like I don't love you. I blinked. Not like you don't? I stopped myself, running a hand over my face. I could feel my pulse pounding at the back of my skull. I had expected something. Tears, guilt, anything. But this wasn't regret. This wasn't remorse. This was contempt. She didn't just cheat. She enjoyed knowing she got away with it. I inhaled sharply, my hands clenching and unclenching at my sides. How long? Terry made a face. What? I locked eyes with her. How long? She shifted, rolling her shoulders. Does it matter? I felt something crack inside me. Yes, Terry, it matters. She exhaled through her nose, like I was the one being difficult. A few months, she admitted with a careless shrug. Not that long. I actually laughed. Months. She had been coming home every night, kissing me, sleeping next to me, lying to my face for months. I shook my head. And you weren't ever gonna tell me, huh? She didn't answer. That was my answer. I felt my jaw tighten, my breath coming faster. I turned away, pacing the room, trying to breathe. Terry sighed again. I swear to God, Jake, you're acting like such a... Shut up. She blinked. Excuse me. I turned back to her, and something in my face must have startled her because for the first time, she actually shut up. You don't get to talk anymore, I said, voice low. Not after this. Not after you. I gestured at her. After this. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Every time I asked if something was wrong, I continued, stepping closer. You lied to me. Every time I told you I loved you, you looked me in the eye and lied. Every time I made plans for our future, you let me. She looked away. Oh, now you can't look at me? I laughed bitterly. What? Too ashamed? That got to her. Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. I'm not ashamed. Of course, she wasn't. Terry had never regretted anything in her life. I let out a long breath, running a hand through my hair. You know what? I muttered. Forget it. She frowned. Forget what? This. I gestured between us. Us. For the first time, her face changed. What? I stared at her, no longer angry, no longer even hurt. Just done. You heard me. I turned, grabbing my keys off the dresser. I'm done. She scoffed, following me as I walked toward the door. Oh, please. You're not serious. I didn't answer. Jake. She grabbed my arm. Jake. Stop. Let's talk about this. I yanked my arm away so fast she stumbled back. There's nothing left to talk about. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. So, that's it? You're just gonna walk away? I turned to face her one last time. No, Terry. You walked away. A long time ago. And with that, I left out. I walked out the front door and kept going. I didn't slam it. I didn't throw anything. I didn't yell. I just left. The sun was too bright, the air too still. Everything felt wrong. My truck was sitting in the driveway like it had no idea the world had just collapsed. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed. A bird chirped. Life was still moving. But I wasn't. I climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body was shaking. My pulse was a dull, angry drum in my ears. Terry was cheating on me. Had been cheating. For months. I squeezed my eyes shut, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. It was real. It had actually happened. I had walked into my own home and found my wife in our bed with some other man. And not just any man, a cop. Some uniformed idiot who had probably walked past me at the grocery store. Nodded at me like we were just two regular guys. Did he know? Did he know I existed? Did he know this was my house, my marriage? Or did Terry feed him some lie? Tell him I was the bad guy? Make up some sob story to justify screwing around? And what about the others? Because let's be honest, there were others. Terry didn't just become this person overnight. I should have seen it. I should have felt it. All those late nights. The sudden, weird protectiveness over her phone. The way she would pick fights over nothing just to storm out and disappear for hours. The way she had stopped touching me. I let out a sharp breath, sitting back in the seat. My hands were still shaking. My skin felt too hot, like my own body was rejecting me. I needed to move. I turned the key, and the truck rumbled to life. My hands worked on autopilot, shifting gears, pulling out of the driveway. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here. Not with her still inside. Not with our bed still warm from someone else. The second I hit the road, my phone buzzed. Terry. I ignored it. She called again. Then again. By the fifth call, she gave up. A text popped up instead. Come back so we can talk. Please. I laughed. Actually laughed. Talk? Talk? What was there to talk about? Did she want to explain how her mouth had accidentally fallen onto some other guy? Did she want to give me another, "This isn't what it looks like" speech? I threw the phone into the passenger seat and gripped the wheel harder. Jaw clenched. The highway stretched out in front of me, open and empty. I drove. I drove until the town blurred in the rearview mirror, until my thoughts weren't so goddamn loud. I passed a gas station and realized I had no idea where I was going. And worse, I had no idea where to go. Couldn't go home. Not yet. Not ever. I had no family nearby. No close friends who weren't just our friends. And that was the thing, wasn't it? Everything in my life was ours. The house, the people, the memories. It was all tainted. I pulled into a rundown diner parking lot and killed the engine. My hands still hadn't stopped shaking. I needed coffee. I needed something. The place was nearly empty. Just a few tired truckers and an old couple sitting by the window. A waitress glanced up as I walked in, but I didn't register much else. I found a booth in the back and sat down hard. Then I just stared at my hands on the table. I wasn't wearing my ring. I had taken it off sometime between walking out of the house and getting in the truck. I didn't even remember doing it. But there it was, sitting in my palm like a dead weight. I clenched my fist around it, pressing it into my skin until it hurt. Coffee? I looked up. The waitress was standing there. An older woman with tired eyes and a knowing expression. Like she had seen men like me before. Shell-shocked, empty, wrecked. Yeah, I croaked. She poured me a cup, set it down, and walked away without another word. I stared at the coffee. Then I reached for my phone. The messages were still there, stacked on top of each other like a desperate, pathetic tower. Please come back. We need to talk. Jake, answer me. I know you're reading these. Then, finally, the one that made my blood run cold. If you don't come back, I'll make sure you regret it. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. My pulse, which had finally started to settle, kicked back up. If you don't come back, I'll make sure you regret it. I read it once, twice, then again. A threat? A warning? A desperate attempt to get my attention? Knowing Terry, it could be all three. I had seen her pull this kind of manipulation before. Never on me, not like this, but on other people. Friends, co-workers, even her own family. Terry didn't just argue. She played the game. She twisted things, shifted blame, always made herself the victim no matter what. And now she was doing it to me. I exhaled sharply, setting the phone down before I crushed it in my grip. I could feel the heat rising in my chest again. The same raw, burning anger that had nearly swallowed me whole back in that bedroom. But I wouldn't give her the reaction she wanted. Not this time. I picked up the coffee cup, took a long sip, and forced myself to think. I had two options. One, I could go back, let her spew whatever half-baked excuse she was preparing, and sit there while she tried to convince me that what she did somehow wasn't as bad as it looked. Two, I could walk away. For good. The problem was, I didn't know what walking away meant yet. Did I get a lawyer? Did I call someone? Did I pack my things? Or did I make her leave? I had no clue. All I knew was that I wasn't going back. Not tonight. Not ever. The diner door jingled, and I glanced up on instinct. A man in a faded baseball cap walked in, grabbed a seat at the counter, and ordered a coffee. The waitress poured it without asking questions. The whole place had that quiet, detached energy. Like no one was in a rush, and no one cared why you were there. It was exactly what I needed. I checked my phone again. Another message had come through while I wasn't looking. Fine. If you're going to be dramatic about this, then I guess we're done. But don't expect me to sit around waiting for you to come crawling back. I scoffed. Crawling back? She was still trying to control the narrative. Still trying to convince herself that she was the one with the power. I put the phone down and rubbed my face. My mind flashed back to the moment I had walked in, the way she had looked at me. Not guilty, not even surprised, just annoyed, like I had interrupted something. Because hadn't I? If I had come home 10 minutes later, they would have been finished. The sheets would have been straightened. The smell of cologne and sweat would have faded. And Terry would have greeted me at the door like nothing had happened. How many times had that already happened? How many times had I kissed her, touched her, slept beside her right after she had been with someone else? The thought made me sick. The waitress came back, eyeing my untouched coffee. You need anything else? I shook my head. No, thanks. She hesitated, then nodded and walked off. I needed to figure out what the hell to do next. I couldn't sit here all night, and I wasn't about to check into some cheap motel just to stare at the ceiling and spiral. I needed a plan. And then, for the first time in years, a name popped into my head. Matt. Matt was my best friend back in college. We had been tight, thick as thieves, as my mother used to say. But life happened. I got married, he moved 2 towns over, and before we knew it, years had passed with nothing but the occasional text. But I knew one thing for sure, Matt would take me in. I picked up my phone again and scrolled down through my contacts until I found his name. I hadn't called him in over a year, maybe 2. I hit dial anyway. It rang. Once, twice, then, Jake. His voice was groggy, confused. Dude, what the hell? You know what time it is? I glanced at the clock above the counter. 11:42 p.m. Shit. Yeah. I muttered. Sorry, man. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. There was a pause, then a shift. I could hear the change in his tone before he even spoke. What happened? I exhaled. It's bad, Matt. Where are you? I looked around. Some diner off the highway. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. You don't even know where. I'll find you. Just stay put. And then he hung up. I stared at the phone for a second, then placed it back on the table. For the first time since I walked in on her, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone in this, that I sat in that booth for another 20 minutes, staring at my cold coffee, replaying everything in my head like some kind of sick movie. The sheets, the smell of perfume, the goddamn cop's badge sitting on my nightstand. Terry's face when she saw me. Not guilty, not ashamed, just annoyed. I felt a sharp, dull pressure behind my eyes. I wasn't gonna cry, I was too angry for that. But it was hitting me now. The sheer weight of it. I had spent years with her. Years building a life, believing we were solid, trusting that whatever problems we had, they were normal, fixable. I thought she loved me. I knew I had loved her. But had she ever really loved me? Or had I just been convenient? Had I just been the safe choice while she went out and found her thrills elsewhere? I clenched my jaw and ran a hand over my face. I didn't want to think like this. Didn't want to start unraveling every memory, every happy moment, and questioning whether it had been real. But that's what betrayal does, doesn't it? Poisons everything. The door to the diner swung open, and I looked up. Matt. He was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing him differently now. He still had the same dark, messy hair, the same sharp look in his eyes that always made it seem like he was 2 steps ahead of you. But there was something else, concern. Real concern. The second he spotted me, he walked over fast. No hesitation, no small talk. He slid into the booth across from me and studied my face. Tell me everything. I exhaled. Terry's cheating on me. Matt didn't blink. Didn't say, shit, man, or I'm sorry, or any of the things people usually say when they hear something like that. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. With who? I let out a humorless laugh. A cop. That got a reaction. His eyes widened slightly. You're serious? I nodded. Matt let out a slow whistle. Jesus. Yeah. How'd you find out? I swallowed. The details were still fresh, still raw. I could still hear the sound I had heard when I walked in, still see the look on her face when she realized she had been caught. I told him everything. From the moment I pulled into the driveway to the moment I walked out the door. The way she had tried to downplay it, the way she had talked to me like I was the unreasonable one. The texts, the threats, the sheer audacity of it all. Matt didn't interrupt. He just listened. And when I was done, he leaned back in his seat and let out a low breath. "All right," he said. "So what's the plan?" I stared at him. "What?" He shrugged. "You staying at my place? Or are we burning the house down?" For the first time in hours, I actually smiled. Just a little. Matt grinned. "There he is." I shook my head, rubbing my temple. "No arson tonight, man. Fine? Fine. So you coming with me?" I hesitated. Not because I was considering going back. Hell no. But because it felt real now. If I went with Matt, if I left tonight, it meant this was it. I was really, truly done with her. And even after everything, even after the betrayal, the lies, the absolute disrespect, there was still a small, stupid part of me that was grieving. Not for her. For the version of my life I thought I had. Matt must have seen it on my face, because he leaned in again. "Jake, you know she's not gonna stop, right?" I looked at him. "She's not sorry," he continued. "She's not gonna beg for forgiveness. She's not gonna try to fix this. She's just gonna keep playing games until you break down and do whatever she wants." I knew he was right. I had seen it in her eyes when I left. She hadn't been scared of losing me. She had been angry that I had walked away first. Like I was the one betraying her. I exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Yeah, let's go." Matt grinned. "Good choice." I tossed some cash on the table and followed him out to his car. As I climbed in, I felt my phone buzz again. Another text. I didn't even look at it. I just turned the damn thing off. The drive to Matt's place was quiet at first. The only sound was the low hum of the tires against the road and the occasional streetlight flickering past the windows. I stared out into the dark, my thoughts running circles around each other, tangling up like a knot I couldn't untie. Matt didn't push me to talk. He just drove, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, waiting for me to come up for air. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, he spoke. "You still in shock? Or are you thinking about going back?" I turned my head, frowning. "Going back?" He glanced at me. "Yeah, I mean, you turned your phone off. That tells me you don't want to deal with her. But does it mean you're done for real?" I exhaled through my nose, staring out the windshield. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, man." Matt let out a low chuckle. "Well, first off, divorce the bitch." It was so blunt, so matter-of-fact, that I actually felt a small, sharp sting in my chest. Not because he was wrong, he wasn't. But because I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Divorce. That word felt huge. Bigger than anything I had ever had to deal with. I was supposed to spend my life with her. We had built a life together. The house, the vacations, the future we had talked about. What happened to all of that? Was it all just bullshit? I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I muttered. "Guess I have to." Matt snorted. "No, you don't have to. You get to." I shot him a look. "Think about it," he said, keeping his eyes on the road. "How many guys get a warning sign this clear? Most people go years being lied to. They spend their whole lives thinking they've got a solid marriage, just for their wife to wake up one day and drop some, 'I've never been happy' speech. But you got lucky." "Lucky?" I scoffed. "Yeah, real lucky. I'm serious, man. You caught her. You saw it with your own eyes. You don't have to waste another second on someone who doesn't respect you. You get to leave now while you're still young, while you still have options." I stared at him, processing. Matt had never liked Terry. He had never said it outright, but I had always known. I used to think it was just because she wasn't his type. Matt had always gone for the easygoing, laid-back kind of girl, and Terry was, well, the opposite. But now I was starting to think he had seen something I hadn't. I let my head fall back against the seat, closing my eyes for a moment. "Divorce," I said, testing the word out. It still felt foreign, heavy, but also freeing. Matt nodded. "Divorce." We pulled into his driveway a few minutes later. His house was smaller than mine, one story older with a front porch that he never sat on. It was the kind of place that looked lived in, comfortable. As soon as we got inside, Matt tossed his keys onto the counter and grabbed 2 beers from the fridge. He handed me one without a word and flopped onto the couch. I stayed standing. My brain wouldn't shut up. I kept replaying everything. The way she had looked at me. The way she had lied like it was nothing. The way she had told me to grow up, like this was somehow my fault. And that text, if you don't come back, I'll make sure you regret it. I finally sat down and cracked open the beer. You think she meant that? Matt raised an eyebrow. Meant what? The text. The whole make sure you regret it thing. Matt took a sip, then smirked. Oh, definitely. I sighed, rubbing my temples. She's mad you left first, he continued. Girls like Terry? They need to be the ones calling the shots. You walking away before she had the chance to control the situation? That probably killed her. I knew he was right. I had seen it in her eyes. Terry wasn't upset because she had lost me. She was upset because I had taken the choice away from her. She might try to screw you over, Matt added. Legally, I mean, she could go after the house, your money, everything. I clenched my jaw. Don't let her, he said. You need a lawyer. Fast. I let out a slow breath. Yeah. You can stay here as long as you need, he said casually, like it was already decided. I looked at him. You sure? Of course. He smirked. Besides, if you weren't here, I'd probably just be watching some depressing crime documentary, eating cereal straight out of the box. I laughed. A real laugh. First one all day. Matt grinned. See? Life's already looking up. I shook my head, taking another sip of beer. You're an idiot. Yeah. But I'm your idiot. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something shift. Like maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. I didn't sleep much that night. Matt had set up the spare room for me. Clean sheets, extra blankets, even a fresh towel in case I wanted to shower. He didn't ask me how long I was staying, didn't press me for more details. He just handed me a beer, told me to sleep on it and left me alone. But my brain wouldn't shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, Terry, her messy hair, the imprint of another man's hands still on her skin. The way she had pulled the covers up only after I walked in. Like she hadn't given a damn about what she was doing, only about getting caught. The things she had said, the nothing in her eyes. At some point, I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, my phone was buzzing. I groggily reached for it, blinking at the screen. 5:43 a.m. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but I recognized it instantly. Terry. She hadn't called since last night. Hadn't texted again after that last message. And now, at nearly 6 in the morning, she was calling from a different number. I let it ring. Then it stopped. And then another text. I need to talk to you. Call me back. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then, 3 dots. She was typing. I watched, my stomach twisting, waiting to see what new manipulation she was about to throw at me. And then the message came through. It's about the house. I frowned. Before I could overthink it, I climbed out of bed and walked into the kitchen. Matt was already up, standing by the coffee maker in sweatpants and a t-shirt, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up. Morning. I held up my phone. She texted. Matt raised an eyebrow. And she says it's about the house. Matt snorted. Of course she does. I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. What do you think she wants? Matt took a sip of coffee, considering. Could be anything. Maybe she's trying to get you to come back. Maybe she's already planning how to screw you over. He shrugged. Either way, I wouldn't respond. I stared at the message again. I wanted to ignore it. I should ignore it. But there was something about the wording that nagged at me. Not I need to talk about us. Not we need to fix this. It was about the house. I turned the phone off and shoved it into my pocket. I need to go back. Matt nearly choked on his coffee. What? Not to talk to her, I said quickly. Just to get my stuff. I don't want her messing with my things. Matt frowned. You really think she would do that? I thought about it. About the look on her face when I walked out. The sheer pettiness in her voice. Yes. Matt sighed, setting his coffee down. All right, but you're not going alone. I frowned. Matt. Dude, no. He shook his head. If you walk in there by yourself, she's gonna twist it into something else. Either she'll try to get inside your head, or she'll pull some crazy stunt and make you look like the bad guy. He grabbed his keys off the counter. I'm coming with you. I wanted to argue, but I knew he was right. Fine, I muttered. The drive back felt like walking into a battlefield. I didn't even recognize my own neighborhood at first. The streets looked too normal, like nothing had changed, like my life hadn't just imploded. When we pulled into the driveway, I tensed. Terry's car was there. Matt killed the engine and turned to me. "You good?" I nodded even though I wasn't. "All right," he said. "Just in and out. Don't let her get inside your head." I took a breath, opened the door, and stepped out. The second my foot hit the pavement, the front door swung open. Terry stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking pissed. "What the hell, Jake?" I ignored her, walking up the steps. "I'm here for my stuff." She scoffed. "Are you serious? You leave in the middle of the night like some coward, and now you just show up like nothing happened." I pushed past her into the house and froze. The place was a mess. Papers, clothes, my stuff all over the floor. The couch cushions had been thrown. My framed pictures were gone. "What the hell did you do?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Terry leaned against the doorframe, arms still crossed. "Well, I figured if you were so eager to leave, I might as well start helping you pack." Matt let out a low whistle. "Jesus, lady, you really are crazy." Terry's eyes snapped to him. "Why is he here?" "Because I don't trust you," I said flatly. Her nostrils flared. "You're unbelievable." I walked past her and headed for the bedroom. My dresser was half empty. My clothes had been thrown into a pile on the floor. "Real mature." "Terry?" I muttered, grabbing a duffel bag and shoving my stuff into it. "Oh, I'm the immature one?" she snapped, following me inside. "You're the one who ran off to go cry to his little friend instead of talking like an adult." I clenched my jaw. "Talking? You mean like how you talked to me before screwing another guy in our bed?" She had the nerve to roll her eyes. "Oh my God. Get over it, Jake." I turned, slowly. "What?" She threw up her hands. "We're not getting back together. Okay? So you can drop the whole betrayed husband act. It's pathetic." I stared at her. She wasn't even pretending anymore. I nodded slowly. "All right, I'll get over it." I threw the last of my clothes into the bag and zipped it up. "But you're gonna regret this." She smirked. "Oh yeah? And why's that?" I walked past her, slung the bag over my shoulder, and stopped at the bedroom door. Then I turned back. "Because you just lost the only person who ever gave a damn about you." And then I walked out. I didn't look back. Not when I walked through the house, stepping over the mess she had made. Not when I passed the pictures she had taken down. The broken lamp, the overturned chair, her tantrum in full display. I kept walking, past the memories, past the years I had wasted, past the woman I thought I knew. Terry followed me to the door. "You're being dramatic, Jake," she called after me. "Just take your stuff and go, but don't act like you're some kind of victim. You're not innocent in this either." I stopped at the threshold, gripping the strap of my duffel bag so tight my fingers ached. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see her out of the corner of my eye. "Explain that." My voice was steady, calm, deadly. Terry crossed her arms. "Oh please, you weren't exactly perfect either. You were always working, always distracted. Half the time, I felt like I didn't even have a husband, just some roommate who paid the bills and slept next to me." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. There it was, the classic deflection. She cheated, but somehow I was to blame. I turned fully now, meeting her eyes. "So, let me get this straight. You felt lonely, so instead of, I don't know, talking to me, you decided the best solution was to sleep with a cop in our bed." Terry rolled her eyes. "Oh my God. I already told you. It wasn't serious." I tilted my head. "Really? 'Cause it was serious enough for you to strip naked and let him inside you." Her jaw clenched. "You're disgusting." "No, Terry," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "You're disgusting." For the first time, something flickered in her expression. A crack. A small, thin fracture in the mask she had been wearing since the second I caught her. I leaned in slightly. "You want to blame me? Fine. Tell yourself whatever you need to so you can sleep at night. But you and I both know the truth." She swallowed, but didn't say anything. I straightened. "Enjoy your life, Terry." I nodded toward the mess she had made. "Looks like you're off to a great start." And then I stepped outside. Matt was leaning against his car, arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold with quiet amusement. "She's a real piece of work," he muttered as I approached. I tossed my bag into the back seat and exhaled slowly. My hands were still shaking. Not with fear, not even with anger anymore. Just adrenaline. "She's not done," I said. "I can feel it." Matt nodded. "Of course not. Women like that, they don't like losing control. She's gonna come at you from every angle she can find." I clenched my jaw. "Let her try." Matt smirked. "Now that's the spirit." I opened the car door, but just as I was about to get in, Terry stepped outside. Matt saw her first, and I heard his groan before I turned around. She stood on the porch, arms still crossed, staring at me like I was the one who had betrayed her. "You'll be back," she said. I let out a sharp breath through my nose. "Not in this lifetime." She smirked. "You think you're gonna find someone better than me?" She let out a short laugh. "Good luck, Jake. No one's ever gonna put up with you like I did." I laughed. Actually laughed. And then, just for the hell of it, I said, "You know what, Terry? You might be right." I opened the car door wider. "But I'd rather be alone than be with you." Her smirk dropped. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see it. The flicker of doubt. I climbed into the car and shut the door. Matt got in beside me, shaking his head. Damn, that was cold. I buckled my seatbelt. Not cold enough. We pulled out of the driveway, and for the first time in a long time, I felt freed as Matt pulled onto the main road. I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. I was done. I was out. The weight in my chest didn't disappear. Not yet, but it felt lighter, like I could breathe again, even if the air still stung on the way in. Matt glanced over at me. "So what now?" That was the question, wasn't it? What now? I had no home, no marriage, no real plan beyond getting the hell away from her. And yet, for the first time in a long time, the thought didn't paralyze me. I looked out the window at the empty road ahead. "First, I get a lawyer." Matt nodded approvingly. "Smart. Then, I start over." Matt smirked. "And by start over, you mean?" I shrugged. "Figure out what the hell to do with my life." He chuckled. "Big step for a guy who just had his entire world ripped apart." I exhaled. "Yeah, well, I'm still standing, aren't I?" Matt grinned. "That you are, my friend." We drove in silence for a while, the city lights flickering in the distance. I could still feel the echoes of the past few days rattling around in my skull. The anger, the betrayal, the sheer insanity of it all. But with every mile that stretched between me and her, it got quieter. The rage, the humiliation, the feeling of being played. It was still there, but it wasn't suffocating me anymore. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was still off. I debated turning it back on, just to check, just to see if she had sent more messages, if she had switched tactics, if she had finally let whatever twisted game she was playing go. Then I thought about the look on her face when I walked out, how she had tried to make me feel small, how she had failed. I put the phone back in my pocket. She didn't exist to me anymore. Matt pulled into his driveway and cut the engine. "All right, guest room's still yours for as long as you need it. But I gotta warn you, I'm not exactly a clean freak." I snorted. "Matt, I've seen your fridge." "I already knew that." He grinned. "Welcome home, then." I grabbed my bag and followed him inside. The house was quiet, warm, uncomplicated. Nothing waiting for me. No traps, no manipulation. Just a couch, a fridge full of beer, and a best friend who had my back. I dropped my bag in the guest room and flopped onto the bed. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt at peace. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. Clarity. For the first few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. The ceiling above me wasn't mine. The sheets smelled different, and there was no weight next to me. Then it hit me. I wasn't home, because home didn't exist anymore. I sat up, rubbing my hands over my face. My body felt stiff, my head was heavy, but my mind, for the first time in a long time, felt sharp. I wasn't lost anymore. I knew exactly what needed to happen next. I climbed out of bed and walked into the kitchen. Matt was already there, leaning against the counter, eating cereal straight out of the box. He looked up, still half asleep. "Morning. Morning?" I muttered. grabbing a cup and pouring myself some coffee. "You sleep?" he asked through a mouthful of cereal. "Yeah. First time in a while." Matt nodded. "Good. You're gonna need it." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" He tossed the cereal box onto the counter. "We're getting you a lawyer today." I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness snapping me fully awake. "Already?" Matt gave me a look. "Unless you want to give Terry time to do it first." I thought about that, about what she might be doing right now. Was she sitting in our house, scheming, trying to figure out the best way to screw me over, playing the victim with her friends, spinning some bullshit story about how I was the one who abandoned her? Or was she just waiting, confident that I'd come crawling back like every other guy she had wrapped around her finger? I wasn't about to find out. I set my coffee down. "Let's go." 2 hours later, we were sitting in the office of Rebecca Cole, a divorce attorney Matt swore by. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of no-nonsense energy that made it clear she didn't tolerate bullshit. She folded her hands on the desk and looked at me. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the cheating, about the way Terry had reacted, about the texts, about the threats. Rebecca listened carefully, not interrupting once. When I was done, she exhaled slowly and nodded. "All right," she said. "Here's what we do. First, we file immediately. You don't wait, you don't hesitate. You want to be the one serving her." I nodded. "And the house?" Rebecca tilted her head. "Whose name is it in?" I clenched my jaw. "Both of ours." She sighed. "Okay, that complicates things, but not by much. Do not leave her there alone for too long. The longer she stays, the more of a claim she has." I frowned. "So what do I do? Move back in?" I stared at her. "Are you insane?" Matt snorted. "Yeah, that sounds like a death wish." Rebecca leaned forward. "Listen, I know it sounds awful, but if you let her take over the house, she'll drag this out for months. You need to reestablish that it's yours, too." I exhaled through my nose. "And if she refuses to leave?" Rebecca smirked. "Then we make her." I liked her already. By the time we left the office, my head was spinning, but at least I had a plan. I had power again. Rebecca had made it clear this wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about winning. It was about cutting her out of my life as cleanly as possible. That's what I wanted. No more fighting. No more manipulation. No more waking up every morning wondering if my wife was lying to my face. I was done. As we walked back to Matt's car, he clapped me on the shoulder. "How you feeling?" I let out a slow breath. "Better." The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and strategy. Rebecca worked fast. The divorce papers were being prepared, the process was moving, and by the end of the week, Terry would be served. The thought of her opening that envelope, seeing my name on the plaintiff line, made something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. I was taking control, but there was still one thing left to do. I had to go back. Matt drove me to the house just after noon. I didn't want to give Terry the advantage of knowing when I'd show up, so I hadn't told her I was coming. The goal was simple: reclaim the house. Matt parked a few houses down. "You sure you don't want me to go in with you?" I shook my head. "Nah, I need to do this myself." He studied me for a second, then nodded. "All right, but if she tries anything, call me." I got out of the car, took a breath, and walked up the driveway. The door was unlocked. Not surprising. Terry never saw danger in anything unless it directly affected her. I stepped inside. The house was dim, the blinds half closed, the air stale. I could smell old perfume, something floral and cloying, layered over what I could only describe as resentment. Then I heard it, movement from the kitchen. I walked forward, my heart pounding, but I kept my face blank. Terry was standing at the counter, drinking coffee, her hair in a loose bun, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, like she still had a right to it. She didn't look surprised to see me. She smirked. Well, look who finally came crawling back." I didn't take the bait. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor and took off my jacket. "I'm not here to fight, Terry. I'm here because this is my house, too." Her smirk didn't falter. "Oh, your house? That's funny, because you seemed perfectly fine leaving it to me." I exhaled. "I'm done playing games. I'm moving back in." Terry laughed. Actually laughed. "Jake, you are delusional if you think I'm just gonna let you play house here while we pretend this isn't happening. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Then I turned the screen toward her. She frowned. What's that? Divorce papers, I said. You'll be getting served soon. Thought I'd give you a heads up. Her face changed. For the first time, the amusement dropped. Her eyes darted across the screen, reading the words, processing the reality of it. You already filed? I put my phone away. Yeah, I did. Terry swallowed. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out her next move. And then, just like that, the mask was back. She sighed, rubbing her temple like I was being ridiculous. Jake, come on. Don't do this. I stared at her. Do what? Be stupid. She set the coffee down, stepping closer. You're mad. I get it. You feel betrayed. But you and I both know that divorce? It's just gonna make things ugly. I scoffed. It's already ugly, Terry. She reached out, brushing her fingers against my arm. I stepped back. Her face twitched, but she didn't drop the act. Jake, listen to me, she said, her voice softening. You don't want this. We don't want this. You filed out of anger. But once we sit down and actually talk, there's nothing left to talk about. I cut in. This isn't fixable. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. So that's it? Just like that. I met her gaze, steady and cold. Just like that. Something in her cracked. I saw it. The loss of control. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Fine. You want to throw this all away? Be my guest. She snatched her coffee cup and walked past me toward the stairs. But don't come crying to me when you realize no one else is going to put up with you. I smiled. A real, slow, deliberate smile. I'm counting on that. Terry stopped halfway up the stairs, her shoulders tense. But she didn't turn around. She kept walking. I let out a slow breath, grabbed my bag, and walked into my bedroom. For the rest of the day, I focused on reclaiming my space. I cleaned. I opened the windows. I threw out every trace of her. Her perfume bottles? Gone. Her stupid decorative pillows? The bedsheets? Burned. By the time I was done, the house felt different. It didn't feel like ours anymore. Felt like mine. I stood in the middle of the living room, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the emptiness. It didn't scare me. Felt like a new beginning. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I realized I wasn't sad. I wasn't heartbroken. I was relieved.